Today's episode is brought to you by Crescent Plumbing Supply. Head to 6614 Olive just north of Delmar Loop and check out their new incredible showroom. With sales and design reps ready to help and a knowledgeable service desk ready to get that part for the fix you need, it will be a pleasure. Check out crescentsupply.com for inspiration, and don't forget to mention Soccer Dad Pod for that discount. Since the early 80s, Mike Woitalla has been writing articles for all of our favorite soccer magazine, Soccer America. Before there was 24/7 coverage of the EPL, LaLiga, MLS, and at least 30 college games a night on everywhere, there was a magazine that brought most of us our soccer fix until the rare U.S. men's national team game was occasionally broadcast. Mike talks about the publication's path and provides a level of insight second to none, thanks to his front row seat to U.S. soccer, polished by his keyboard. Let's go.
Oh, I know what this is.
Soccer Dad Pod time.
Is that when you hit a home run in baseball, Nintendo?
A little bit. This is in honor of tonight's big fight, baby. You don't recognize this? Mike Tyson's Punch-Out.
Okay.
Theme music. Yeah, you remember that from your childhood?
Yeah.
Did you have Mike Tyson Punch-Out?
Oh, I absolutely had. I always struggled when I got to Soda Popinski until I finally read the cheat codes. But the Hippo guy was easy. Just hit him in the, Mike Tyson's Punch-Out was just one of those all-time games. And you know what the best part about it is? Our guest today, there was a chance that I was reading the magazine and putting it
As
down
you were playing?
And also playing that game.
You know what? I concur. I guarantee I was, because it would have been sitting next to the TV in which we were playing. And, doing our own Mike Tyson Punch-Out, three boys. That's what we did. Soccer Dad Pod, we're back. Got another episode. Excuse me. Really appreciate all the support here lately. You guys have been great. We're kind of back in the groove. We had a little bit of a lull there for a little bit. The fall drearies. Plus, there was a hell of a lot of travel going on. So we're getting back in the groove. Got the schedule lined up. A lot of great guests. Including obviously today's episode. But I want to start with a going back one. Because, we've talked about this before, and every now and then we'll do an episode, and, I love all of them, and I hate to sound like a cliche parent, like, oh, I love all my kids equal. I don't necessarily love them all equally, but I enjoy every time we do this because it's fun, right?
I know Max is your favorite.
He's up there, man. He's my morning squawk box and coffee kid, so yeah, we bond. But, the last episode, we were privileged enough to be joined by the Mr. Pete Sorber and his son Mike, right? And it was, I knew at the time, just hearing the stories and hearing the generation of kind of influence. You got a guy that was born in 1931, right?
Yeah.
And his relationship with Harry Keogh, and and on and on and on and on. We knew it was special at the time. I knew it was. Woke up the next day, dropped the episode. Sure enough, bam, 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 bam. Here come all the text messages, of the secret society that is listening. And they were like, oh, holy shit, it just made me feel good. Yeah. And that's the fun part. I just really take a lot of pride in this show from that standpoint. And thank you to the listeners, because we do have an opportunity to capture these legends, these foundational figures of St. Louis soccer in this audio format, and you get to hear it from the horse's mouth, man.
Yeah, and my 2 cents on that is we often do these shows, and my analogy won't be towards the kids, but you can often leave these recordings, and we're 200 in or whatever we are, when they're special. And I just had a smile on my face, and heard the rumors, know of them, have a lot of friends, have a lot of guests on this show that have been around him. His demeanor and his humbleness, and his specialness is maybe not, is kind of a cliche word, it was really nice to capture that in perpetuity on this show.
Yep.
I think that was the most special part because our listeners, if they didn't know, it will certainly seep through in the amount of lives that he touched. And I mean, has anybody ever came to you? Nobody ever has said, Mr. Sorber is a dick.
right.
You know what I mean?
No. There's plenty of our guests have had people come to us and say, "Oh my God, why'd you have that?" But,
Well, and everybody's had a sporting coach in their
No, I
life,
know.
whether they were good or bad,
Yeah.
and got the job done. That you could say, "Hey, that guy's a jerk."
Go listen to it. For those of you that are coaches and maybe new coaches, new families that aren't familiar, go get familiar with it because there's the nuggets of coaching tidbits, etc. You're going to appreciate it. So thank you to Mr. Sorber and Mike for making it happen. Appreciate it, guys. Real quick, thank you to Crescent Plumbing Supply for supporting the show. Really appreciate all that you guys do. 6614 Olive. Go check out the warehouse. So we're getting into that shitty early sunset, doldrums, fall. Go in there. It's all bright, white, clean. Spend some money. Say that you know us. You'll get a discount. Make that master bath more palatial. You like that word?
Yeah, I do. Get you a bidet.
Yeah.
Throw the wire brush away and use hydropower.
Hey, so let's get into a little bit of the fun stuff, and then we're going to roll our guest on here in just a second. Your name here, point of the day. A plethora of topics available. What's tickling your fancy today, Gerald?
I have two. The first one I have, your name here, point one of the day, it revolves around the first leg of our United States men's national team playing Jamaica in the capital, Kingston. We come out with a 1-0 win. Pepe gets the goal. Not going to talk about that stuff. The fun part about it is leg 2 is Monday night here in St. Louis. I think our guest boss is on the way here to catch the game. I'm going to be there. I think you will be there. I'm really anxious. I think by all accounts,
Saturday.
It's Monday, and Potch I think is going to really play. I think Way will play. I love that he kept Christian on. But here's the point: all that stuff aside, all the soccer guys that listen, watch the game. Are we serious that we're still in our CONCACAF and we're playing on a surface and a field like that? I mean, for me,
it was like
it's
the Bad
real,
News Bears
and I don't
backyard,
think people
man.
understand. So you got 3 world powers in North America with Mexico, Canada, United States. They all have different issues with facilities, but they're all pretty good. And it's a real thing when you have to go into that CONCACAF division and go on the road and play on these farm fields, and not even a farm field. We have better under 10 rec soccer fields than we played on last night on TV. Unbelievable.
Not good. Here's a crazy stat that I read from the game with Potch's win, his first win in CONCACAF away within CONCACAF. He officially ties Berhalter for wins away in CONCACAF at 1. And I thought that was bullshit, but I saw multiple Twitter accounts putting it up there. Winalda's in particular, I went through and was reading it, and everybody's like, I don't do the homework, right? I let everybody else get in the weeds. Sure enough, one win away in CONCACAF, and Potts just tied Berhalter.
I want to get our longtime soccer aficionado guest on this when we bring him in, his opinion. But there were multiple times where people are moving and cutting and going side to side like our game offers. And we're talking 1 by 2 foot of turf just moving. The ball, when they're playing, I cannot even believe that the field is what we're playing on. And I understand it's part of the game, and we've all played on bad fields, but it's laughable. I mean, that is a complete joke.
Your name here, point of the day, is we still don't have a head coach here in St. Louis City, SC. On the first team. I have a feeling chess pieces are moving around, and they're probably of the Deutschland variety. Everybody's speculating, but I have to believe it's coming down soon. But the part B of this is the announcement on the City 2 side. Congratulations to Bobby Murphy on the season that you had, as well as now taking on the new role as coach and director of the new USL1 team, I believe, up in Portland.
Yes, sir.
So congratulations to you, and congratulations / good luck coming in to Critch. Coach, he's a player favorite down in the academy. All the boys have worked with him in some capacity. He's moved up the ladder, now taking on City 2. So congratulations, Coach Critch, Critchley, for the City 2 placement. And hopefully it's just more of the same. This is two of the 3 years have made it to the semifinal finals in the MLS 2 world. So I hope we can keep it going.
Yeah, and my 2 cents on that is kudos to what you said. I ditto. Bobby Murphy, final. Makes the playoffs the second year, final the third year. Just shy of the final.
Right.
Did pretty well. Had a lot of wins. If it's about measuring success, good luck, Critch. Just like JB said, because you got to be damn good to keep that job, and maybe it's just an organizational thing on the direction and where we're going to go with bringing youth kids up. I'm not privy to that. Your name here, point 3 of the day, and then we'll bring the guest on.
Which
I often bring up our men's college game, and I'm not going to go through all the conference tournaments, but I want to go on 2 because we're a St. Louis soccer pod. SLU,
the Billikens.
A10. They will play Sunday against Dayton. They lost 4-1 in the season. Dayton, I thought, was the superior team in that game. SLU's got their work cut out for them. Word on the street is they don't have to win the game because they're high enough RPI to make the tournament. We'll see about that, but winning that game will be nice to be the champions and also get the automatic bid. And good luck to our Billikens. That plays Sunday. Please watch it. If you're a soccer fan, watch it because it's a phenomenal level. That Dayton team is very good. Secondly, tomorrow, Saturday, I don't know when this will release. We're recording on a Friday.
We'll put it out tomorrow.
But the OVC, the team that's basically, a short bus ride from the Arch over across the river, SIU, the number 1 seed, is hosting the OVC championship. They got it cooking. Kale has those guys playing. They're getting results. They play a good brand of soccer. I'm anxious to see what happens in that final because I think, of course, it's an automatic bid, but I think the winner of that game is the only one.
Who does SIUE have?
I think they have Houston Christian. I think Houston Christian beat Lindenwood 2-0 in the other semifinal. So that's going to be an interesting game. And just for us as fandom, I hope SIU wins that game and gets and punches their ticket again because I'll be interested to see how they do in the NCAA tournament again. They got bounced first round.
Yeah, because they got to get our number up. We need more ex-guests represented in the NCAA tournament. And you know what? Our boy Jared, they unfortunately they dropped to Georgetown last night in the Big East semifinals.
Yep.
Hopefully their RPI keeps them up.
Seabolt lost too.
Oh, yeah.
Missouri State lost, but I think their RPI is high enough that they're in. Missouri Valley's going to get 2 or 3, I think, this year.
All right, that's enough of the weeds. It's time. Everybody is like, I know there's a generation of Xers and above that have grown up with the publication that NBC Sports and Saturday Morning Loaded with EPL and Premier League Sundays and 24/7 soccer.
Pre-internet.
Yeah, pre-internet, right? When you actually had to read. We have today with us Mr. Mike Woitalla from, his actual title is executive editor. That sounds more polished. Executive editor for Soccer America. Mike, thank you for joining us. How you doing today, man?
Very good. Thank you so much for having me on.
You so I really just want to kick this off as just kind of telling you my story, and then maybe Jared tells you a little bit of his story, because as a frame of reference, growing up here in St. Louis and playing the game and, and loving the game. And as a kid, can't wait to wake up at grandma and grandpa's to turn on PBS and catch an hour of soccer made in Germany, and then as soon as 10 o'clock rolled around, being pissed off that there's no more soccer to be had. my childhood, the fix for the game was two things. Number one, well, three things. Number one, soccer made in Germany because I could just watch, and I was a kid. TVs are cool. But number two was Soccer America, the publication, and number three was Soccer Master advertisement, just so I could read the new shoes over and over again. So, so I just want to say this is really kind of an honor to have somebody join us from the publication because it was such a huge part of my really love affair with the game because it was our only access to it during the mid '80s up through the mid '90s.
Yeah, and I'll let you respond to that because I'd like to give a trip down memory lane for me and how important the publication and the platform was. But Mike, thanks for joining us. Go ahead and respond to JB. What's your 2 cents on that?
I read Soccer America before I worked there. I was born in Germany, but grew up in Texas, and then we moved to Hawaii when I was 10. And the way that we would follow soccer made in Germany, which was amazing, especially because my family is German heritage, and we would get Soccer America. And my dad had a shortwave radio. The younger people won't know what that is, but yeah. So we'd get up on Saturday morning, and they would have the second half of the Bundesliga games and bouncing between games and then giving us the scores. So, back then, the other thing I remember doing was watching Wide World of Sports every Saturday, knowing that there was probably very little, if any, chance of there being soccer on it. But they showed Pele's goal from the 1970 World Cup,
right?
In the in the intro montage, right after that poor guy fell off the ski ramp, and that's how it was back then for us, right? That it wasn't like now where you could watch it any game. You can watch any game you want right now.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's one of those things like, you talk to kids today. I have three of those things who are constantly, watching not only live games, Champions League games on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, Euro on Thursday, and then, EPL all through the weekend. But then they also have access to YouTube, and they get to watch all the highlights, and they get to watch, all these player profiles and team profiles. Like the glut of digital content as it pertains to soccer clearly has never been higher. Soccer America, can you speak to a little bit of, maybe what your view of Soccer America and the role that it really played in the 80s in particular, in the early 90s, pre-internet, big TV contracts, how do you view the role of the publication in assisting grow the game in the States?
Yeah, I started working there in the early 80s. Clay Burling started in 1971 as a regional magazine, but after a few issues, he noticed the national demand. So it, 53 years ago, it became a national weekly publication. And when you talk to you don't even have to go that far back. Tim Howard, when he was getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, talked about how Tony Meola was his hero by reading about him in Soccer America. And, Claudio Reyna, part of the reason he was interested in Virginia was how we covered that program. Same with Alexi Lalas mentioned that. Casey Keller mentioned that when the U.S. was the fourth place finisher at the 1989 U20 World Cup in Saudi Arabia. No one really knew about it unless they had a subscription to Soccer America. Right. So I think we were one of the important, and there are many, factors in the growth of soccer in creating, kind of a community, a soccer community, which I believe in. I do believe we have a soccer community in the United States. That's in a lot of ways a very positive thing and something that's fun and good to be a part of.
Yeah, and for me, and this is a personal touch of it, Soccer America for me, I really cut my teeth in the late 80s through the early 90s in the high school game and played through the mid 90s in college. Soccer America, I was fortunate enough, my dad got the publication, and I remember we would have a little area for the papers, and we'd had a wood burning stove, and we would stack the Soccer America, and we'd refer back to them, but we would never touch the Soccer America. We would use the Post-Dispatch to start the fire.
Yeah, let's burn up all those stock picks. Let's keep the soccer info.
Yeah, we should have probably kept that one with the Walgreens pick.
Yeah,
but,
Apple.
Yeah, so like for me, the coolest thing about Soccer America was just the manner that it came out, and you could expect it, and the amount of coverage that you guys did from the international game to our national team as it was blowing up through the 90s and into the 94 World Cup, and then really what you guys did for our men's and women's soccer game. Like for me, I played in the mid 90s to late 90s, early 2000s in soccer in college, and I remember visibly like looking on, like, because like here's the deal, the internet, all of us that are listening, they really weren't participating with the internet until the mid to late 90s. You know, people say it was invented well before, but nobody was really surfing the internet until late 90s, let's call it. Soccer America was our internet. And so I remember like when we were ranked in college, waiting for the Soccer America team to come out, waiting for the Soccer America Player of the Year. Those were things that were so important to me and my peers. Like you can't replace it. And on a pop culture thing, if you're a soccer guy, Soccer America was the most important thing for us in the 80s and 90s.
Holiday season is upon us, as evidenced by the weather, the pumpkin spice aroma everywhere, and Elf on Prime Video ads. Book your company party, that happy hour, or thank you event at one of the multiple venues under the Kranzberg Arts Foundation umbrella. From seats to standing, disco balls to DJs, they can make it happen. KranzbergArtsFoundation.org.
Soccer America was the most important thing for us in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, so let me just add a really quick question on top of Jared's story there. Did you know that? Did you guys understand how kind of culturally relevant the publication was at a time in which the game's exploding in every corner of the country, but it hadn't, there wasn't a digital outlet yet? Were you guys kind of like, did you know that you were going to be not necessarily trendsetters, but a huge catalyst in helping support the growth?
That's a good question. I think that, you know, we were aware of our role. I don't think maybe, you know, when people talk about it the way that you talk about it now, certainly it didn't feel that, you know, that wonderfully profound. But, you know, when we traveled, whether it was going to a college Final Four or a coaches convention and meeting people that you wrote about or heard about and getting that kind of feedback, you know, I think we did. You know, a lot of what we do is you know, doing our work and maybe not thinking about it that much. But I mentioned, you know, this sort of sense of there being a soccer community out there. And when we traveled, I think we really felt that. And, you know, now I spend a lot of time going through, you know, back issues because they're very useful. You know, and I want to bring up the Pete Sorber show that you had that I'm trying to figure out how to like describe it. And the best I could do is I thought it was beautiful. It really was beautiful.
Well, thank you.
It reminded me the way that Pete talked about soccer, the way that he told the stories. You know, I could almost imagine it, even though I've never been to those places and obviously not in that era. You know, it reminded me of something Bob Bradley, one of the great American coaches who Mike Sorber has worked with for years and years and years, told me that, you know, he was one of the first guys that did the U.S. soccer coaching licenses out in New Jersey in the Northeast. And he said sometimes they would have a coaching class, coaching clinic, whatever you want to call it, and talk soccer. You know, and you know, instead of getting out of the X's and O's and now they have analytics and all this stuff. And I thought of that when I was listening to Pete Sorber, and I was thinking, you know, that to me would be the perfect coaching education. Mm-hmm. Is listening to someone like Pete. And I think earlier, a few weeks ago, you had Tommy Howe on the show. And the way they speak about soccer it's just so natural, and you never forget that it's a game. They don't like resort to whatever the latest jargon is and predictive analytics and false nines and all that kind of stuff.
Or XG,
So,
you know?
Yeah. And I think that historical perspective is, it's important.
Well, let me ask you along those lines, because you really appreciate that you've listened to the episodes and in checking it out, because names like Tommy Howe, like a Pete Sorber, like an Al Trost and a Pat McBride that we've been so honored to have on here. When you hear them talk, there's a common denominator. When we specifically ask them, about the it or what was different, and so many times they dumb it down into this. We let them play. And then all we did is, like, if we didn't like what they were doing, we told them to do something a little bit different, but we made them play. We made them compete. And then you fast forward to today's environment, to your point, where there's so much analytic, there's so much technical training, there's so much tactical oversight that, this attempt to put so much of the game in boxes that have to be formed into the perfect shape. With what result? What do you think has changed? Because you guys have had a front row to this kind of lifespan of American soccer, covering in the 70s and 80s. Just being a homer, all the St. Louis names that we've already talked about. There's been a shift. What do you really attribute that to?
I think there is a bit of a pendulum that swings back and forth between the idea that I am an advocate of that soccer is a fluid game, and you learn from the game, and you can't, it's not a science. It's more of an art than a science. And then we're right now where we've gotten back to this sort of scientific view of soccer, and some of that is business driven. You go to all these analytics companies. There's just a bazillion of them trying to sell software and this kind of stuff. But the soccer is a sport, first of all, that's generally decided by a goal.
Right.
I'll tell you one quick story. Before the 2018 World Cup, Germany was the defending champion. I got a call from some German software companies that was setting up in Silicon Valley with their latest analytics, genius stuff that was gonna. And so Germany was going to use it at the 2018 World Cup, and the San Jose Earthquakes were going to use it because, they're in Silicon Valley. So New York Times even had a story that said Germany's going to be even better because they got this software stuff. So Germany gets knocked out in the first round. San Jose finishes dead last in MLS. It's like you can't program soccer, and and also these trends, these things were like, oh, it's got to be a 3-5-2 or a 4. You got to have this and that and this and that. I loved when Pete was talking about. I think the anecdote Pete Sorber gave was that maybe it was Harry Keogh or someone went somewhere else and came back and told them that they're doing something different. They're playing a back 2 instead of a back 3 and. I just love the way you tell that story. It's always changing, and there's always different things that are going to happen, and it always comes down to the players. And the way that Pete and Mike and Tommy talked about soccer, I think is the way it's the way I like to talk about soccer and hear about soccer. It's about the players.
Yeah, and you can see that in your writing and the way you cover the game. Back to the actual publication, the magazine. So for our listeners, I would like you to kind of run through the timeline and kind of tell us what's going on exactly right now with the group. So you basically start in 1971, and it's a paper publication, and that goes on until I think maybe even 2017, where you guys become fully digital.
We don't.
Go ahead.
We don't do print anymore. We had gone from being weekly for most of our history to being monthly. And in the meanwhile, we had a new owner, Ken Fadner, who basically was the pioneer when it came to e-letters and brought that to Soccer America, which he did at Media Post. And that's basically our bread and butter now, which is delivering the soccer news and the soccer analysis and the soccer personalities in an e-letter form. It's all on our website as well, but that enabled us to keep doing what we do in the digital era.
So I want to maybe bring your focus and attention a little bit to the 314 right here in the shadow of the arch, St. Louis soccer, because you've been with the publication for so long. Inevitably, you've covered probably a laundry list of names that are familiar with the majority of our listeners, and frankly with U.S. soccer fans in general. Can you speak to your opinion or your take on St. Louis and its role within the game historically, from a player perspective, from a coaching perspective, or maybe just a culture perspective? How do you view St. Louis and its relationship with the game here in America?
Well, obviously, when anybody who gets into soccer, especially if you're a curious person or a journalist, you're going to learn about the history of St. Louis soccer, whether that's because you read about the 1950 World Cup, or just the cities that had soccer as what was basically mainstream sport before it was a national mainstream sport. Personally, I would cover college soccer and meet Joey Clark. I would run into Ty Keogh. And, jumping around a little bit, I was at a New York, I think they were still the Metro Stars, when I saw Tim Ream play. And I'm like, wow, that's the kind of defender I like. A defender who plays with his brain and who can play can pass the ball, can play. And I got to interview him after the game. He's a rookie that year. And so he brought up Tommy Howe, and that's when I gave Tommy Howe a call and did an interview with him. And these things, all these connections just start showing up, and I would say that maybe you can say there's a, rejuvenation in a way in St. Louis, not just because of the MLS team, but also, kids like Josh Sargent. I mean, I did a very early story on him. And as soon as I find out who his coaches were, that starts, these recognizable names show up that I maybe knew when they were playing in college. And if memory serves, his parents played, and it just showed that, that soccer culture people talk about, has been there and is there and has always been there in St. Louis.
To your point, I think it was just a couple of weeks ago, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, there was the one of the recent U.S. friendlies where you had Schulte starting in goal, you had Tim in the back line, Sargent was up top. And we homer over St. Louis in general, but St. Louis soccer in particular. And the really special thing about that wasn't necessarily that they were all three from St. Louis. That's unique. But they all came from the same club. They literally had the same youth coach, all the way up. And, and I think that one thing about U.S. soccer in general, like because we were so late to the game in the MLS, we kind of, I feel as if, and Jared, you chime in here, I feel like we have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder now to kind of regain a little bit of that luster. So, anyway, that's just me pontificating at this point. So let me ask you this. You've been writing since the early 80s for the publication. Talk a little bit about, those moments, because you've crossed the paths with some amazing players and coaches, et cetera, and have been at amazing games. What's maybe one or two of those special moments where the bright lights were a little bit brighter?
Pinch yourself.
That you were like, holy shit, I just did that.
Well, the MLS opener 1996 was amazing because, I was a kid that grew up with NASL. I had it in Dallas. We only had it for a year in Hawaii. I read, but I followed it in Soccer America, and obviously, Pele, Beckenbauer, those kind of players. And when that, when I was a kid and Team Hawaii came and they won after a year, that's a pretty crappy thing when teams come and go like that. So when MLS started, it was pretty significant that it finally came back. I mean, the period in between, which was when I was starting to be a journalist, was very interesting too, because it really, kind of elevated the college game in a way. And those were, the college game, of course, is still a very interesting part of the game. But that was an era where, you had your Bruce Arenas, your Bob Bradleys, your Ziggy Schmids, they were college coaches.
Right.
You had players, the Final Four I went to with that St. Louis was in, that's the one where Bora Milutinovic spotted Mike Sorber.
Right.
And, he ended up starting every game at the 94 World Cup. But as far as that, those sort of personal experiences, I had the pleasure of traveling to qualifiers in the United States and in Latin America. As far as soccer experiences go, the 1996 Olympics were a fantastic tournament. That's when they started doing the U23s.
Right.
U.S. didn't get out of the first round, but it was a good team. So yeah, it's now that when I don't think about it that much, so it's really fun to be on the show and kind of get reminded of how lucky I am.
Yeah, and what I'll say, and this is kind of just a PSA, and then I have a quick question that I'd like you to give a remark to is, for me, Soccer America has been one of those publications that have really celebrated our game here, specifically in St. Louis. And maybe it's just due to the amount of pedigree and success and long-time names that have helped our game grow, much like Soccer America has. But there really hasn't been decades, years where Soccer America hasn't involved St. Louis within their publication. So I loved it. Like, I even loved it when I was a kid and the qualifiers used to be at Soccer Park. We would get the Soccer America afterwards, and then it would be like a picture album of that qualifier, which was just phenomenal. So I'm kind of tickling myself or pinching myself to have you on.
Well, let me add to that real quick, because we were lucky enough to have Tab Ramos on a little while back. And in fact, he talked about, unprovoked, kind of the role that Soccer Park, what it meant to the national team. His quote was, "That was our Azteca." And in fact, the picture of him scoring that goal there for the qualifier, that was in your publication. I mean, it was the Soccer America picture, because I remember having that issue.
Yeah, and never threw it away. And which leads me into my question. You had mentioned qualifiers, and you've been fortunate enough to go to many of them. We haven't had the ability to have the qualifiers because of multiple reasons, mainly facility. And Monday night, you had mentioned off mic that your boss was coming to the second leg of this tournament against Jamaica. And I'll be interested to see what his remark is to the facility, and or if he's not already been there, to how the turnout is. But where do you think, after talking about all of this history, like Columbus for me is one of those 1A places that our USA team goes and they win. Where do you think and envision St. Louis moving forward in the next decade of having really consequential men's and women's USA games? I think it could be, I think the sky's the limit here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. A lot of it has to, I remember trying to figure out how they determine where qualifiers are. And it's obviously a combination of what the, geographically what the coach thinks. You got your weather situation and all that. The United States is, it's a continent, so there's so many places, but obviously I think that there's something special about having a national team game in St. Louis. You just got me thinking about this. I believe they had the Olympic qualifiers there too, where it looked like the U.S. was going to get knocked out by Canada, and had just an amazing comeback. And what we had to do to watch those games on TV, they'd be on these obscure cable channels and stuff.
Hey, just as long as you don't say that, if you have a choice between St. Louis and Kansas, make sure you choose the east side of the state, right? Is that what you're saying? Did I hear you correctly?
Yeah. I'm all for St. Louis. I think as many games there as possible.
Hey, so let me, I kind of want to talk a little bit about, maybe how Soccer America is navigating. I'm curious as to kind of the strategy in today's environment, because so many people have no attention span, right? They are looking for 60-second reel on Instagram or TikTok, et cetera. And you guys are still providing kind of that, that old school durable service of, here's an article. We're going to go a little bit deeper. You guys peel the onion, so to speak. Have you thought about leaning more into the kid pop side of content, or is it, we're gonna stick to our articles, and we're gonna dig deep, and this is what we do?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say first of all, one of the challenges for us has always been that soccer has so many parts to it, and people who are interested in the game are interested in so many areas. So we're challenged. I mean, we cover, we don't cover the college game as intensely as we used to, but we also know that people can get that information. Right. But we still fortunately, a lot of the stuff overlaps. But as far as you mentioned, kids and stuff, and this has come up over the years. And I remember one time, like decades ago, where some marketing expert comes in and talks about younger audience and this and younger audience that, and I remember myself as a kid, and I think I can speak for other kids who follow sports, is I don't think they want to be treated like kids. I think that if you're a kid who really likes sports, you like to follow it the same way that I think a 60-year-old would. When it comes to our coverage, it is something that we think about a lot. Are we serving the audience the way they want to be served, and all that. But fortunately, we do have a couple things I think helped us, is that we've been around long enough to kind of understand what people are interested in, and to respect all the different areas of the game, and also that we're a traditional media outlet, and that really helped us. I would say about 4 or 5 years ago, when so much of the news that people consumed would come through, sort of a social media type, modern media that really isn't the kind where you fact check, where you, before you push the button, you really think about whether you got it right, and someone, and your editor looks at it, and you have respect for the facts and for how you're presenting stuff. And I think that we've been able to do well because people appreciate that they've gotten to know that what happens on Twitter it's not necessarily reflective of what's really going out there, because you can have loud voices that are not necessarily accurate voices.
Right.
And as we've talked about the progression of the publication, and now it's fully digital, just doing this show and kind of brainstorming and I'd like to touch on it. Perry Vanderbeck and the group down in Tampa have started this Champions League thing, and it's starting to matriculate its way through the country, and now it's in St. Louis, and my alma mater just won it. Shout out to the Crusaders here in St. Louis. But JB had a brilliant idea. He's like, we need to get involved in this. And so the show, and JB decided to do like what they call a St. Louis Champions League Best 11. And he's done that on the digital platform, and we're kind of interviewing it through the progress. We'll do it with the girls in the spring. And just on the digital side of things, the amount of kid engagement that has provided for our game, because it's at their fingers, is jaw-dropping, is it not?
Well, I'll tell you, Mike, basically, Jared alluded to it earlier, because he was privileged enough and good enough to have been named to the Soccer America Team of the Week while he was a player. And growing up with those Teams of the Week or the Best 11, the idea was to basically simply resurrect something that I had as a kid through your publication. And only what we did is we leaned into the world in which they live, right? Instagram in particular. And, and it's purely democratic. Yeah, all the coaches through the region, hey, nominate a kid. And then 2 days later, all the coaches get to vote on the kids that were nominated. And then it's 1:00 on Wednesday because my son's an academy player and all his buddies, they all play soccer, right? They can't wait for Wednesday at 1:00. It's almost like us waiting for, Friday afternoon whenever the Soccer America would be delivered in the mail. You're just waiting.
Yeah.
Like it's Christmas morning. And I think it came out. And that's where here's where I'm going with this. Like, the stuff that you guys do, I have noticed a heavy lean into national team coverage. Is that a conscious decision? Like, are you looking at data? And I hate to talk about, we were just making fun of the German metric guy that was so good that his team got bounced first round. But have you guys made a conscious decision to go that route?
Well, we always have covered the national teams a lot, and that is
Yep.
and we have done surveys, and even our most recent one, the national team, ranks the highest, which makes sense, obviously, and it brings together, all the different parts of soccer as well. So there's still kids that played college on the team. There's kids that played, that play abroad, that play in MLS. Americans abroad ranks very highly. And I think one of the things we agree on when we think about coverage is, what I think our readers really enjoy is when a story brings together so many different parts of soccer. And if you I did a piece on Mike Sorber coming back to St. Louis and coaching at Scott Gallagher, and that story could have been 10,000 words. It wasn't, but even though it was a shorter article, it's still, he coached, he played in Mexico, he played college soccer. He came out of St. Louis. He was able to touch on not just his experience in St. Louis, but alluded to what it was like for his father, and he had coached with Bob Bradley at LAFC, and that, fortunately, the game provides a lot of those type of people who bring together so many different parts of the game, and those are the stories that I think are very popular among our readers.
Let me ask you just a personal preference then. You've been writing for 30, 35 plus years here. Yeah. You've covered a lot of individuals like Mike Sorber's. Who's the one, like, kind of in your Rolodex? Who's the one that maybe you were just really surprised or enamored by the engagement and has maybe become like, man, I can't wait to talk to him again? Like, who's the player that really gets you excited because of maybe the je ne sais quoi of the individual above and beyond the soccer side?
Yeah, there's so many, and I love talking to Tab Ramos. The '90 World Cup team would have been the first one I covered, so I would have know those guys, and people like Tony Meola and Tab and Mike from the '94 team. They always come across to me as just straightforward and honest about the game. I just
good guys.
Enjoy the way they talk about soccer. So yeah, I mean, there's so many, and I got to say, even now with the national team, when I go to a game and I talk to these guys, they're interesting, good kids. There's a lot of good people in soccer I like talking to.
Mike, you're playing Switzerland here. You're being that mom that loves all her kids equally. How about this? Let me reframe. If you're on that desert island and you get to take your one article with you and just read your one article of that one player, instead of that one song, who's the player?
The player, I guess I would pick Tab.
Yeah.
Tab Ramos.
That's a safe pick. Like when you talk about saying picking Tab, and I look at different pop culture things that happened during our game, especially during the meat and potatoes of your time covering with the publication. Where does the Clint Mathis World Cup Mohawk? Because I can just still remember opening Soccer America because it was still public, and you got Clint Mathis screaming with his Mohawk. I mean, there's just certain times of the eras that went on that you guys at Soccer America had to be salivating on. You couldn't wait to cover and write thousands of words about it. Talk about some of those hot button times.
Yeah. Well, the '94 World Cup obviously was super special, being in the United States. But then you mentioned Clint Mathis in 2002, which was the best performance by a U.S. team at a World Cup.
Yeah.
But in the modern era, I mean, the 1930 team in a smaller World Cup, got to the semis, but that Bruce Arena team was incredible. Was probably the best national team we've had when it comes to a World Cup.
Yeah.
With guys like Clint and John O'Brien and Claudio Reyna, and I co-wrote a book with Claudio Reyna shortly after that World Cup, which was a lot of fun to do and very interesting because of the parts of the game that he touched, which would have been, you've got your St. Louis, and then I think you've got that New Jersey Northeast area where, Claudio wasn't one of the Carney kids, but he was a New Jersey kid. You had the Ramos, Miola, John Harkes. So you had that sort of similarity between the St. Louis area and the Northeast area, and I see that. I mean, I thought about that when I was talking to Mike the other day. Is that the conversation had that sort of comfortable, enjoyable kind of vibe that I would have when I would, talk to New Jersey guys about the game.
Let me get your take then on, maybe a little bit of the state of the union of U.S. soccer in general, because you've had a unique catbird seat in so much that you were front row to the Tab Ramoses and the Claudios,
the relationships,
through the best of years, and now. If you believe the hype and if you believe social media, if you believe so many of the pundits, the argument is that the quality of our players today are the best it's ever been. And they use the current rosters and the teams in which these kids are playing on, these young men, AC Milan's and in the EPL and so many in the Bundesliga. Like we have more American players playing at higher and higher levels than at any time in our history. But it seems as if there's still like a disconnect. Now, is Poch the fix? We don't know that yet. We're only a handful of games in. What's when you sit back and you're sitting around a campfire with a stogie and a bourbon and you pontificate what's going on, what's your take? Why do you think it's not clicking the way that maybe the 2002 team did with arguably lesser talent from a individual player perspective?
That's something to think about a lot. First of all, I would say that the U.S. is getting better, but so are the other countries, right? Like it's not like all of a sudden everybody else is going to stay at one level and wait for the U.S. to get better. So you're going to have that. The CONCACAF nations are all better, to a large extent thanks to MLS because a lot of their players play in our league. As a generalization, and something I brought up with Mike Sorber, and I think we agreed, was that you go back 20, 30 years, the best players now are like the best. We have a lot more good players, but we are getting more like top players, but that's where, we haven't hit the point where we have, a lot of unique, great players, right?
We don't have anybody going for the Balloon d'Or.
Well, you probably, it's buried in our list of episodes, but we talked to Brad Davis after the U.S. team was bounced out of Gold Cup, I believe.
Yep.
And
Copa America.
Yeah, recently the last big tournament, and he came in guns a-blazing, and specifically with data, and he sat down and we immediately talked to him like, "Hey, Brad, what's your take? What's going on?" He goes, "You know what? I'm prepared." And he pulls out this sheet of paper. He goes, "Let me ask you." He said, "Our 2014 team, with all these MLS players and a handful of European players," he goes, "of the roster, how many of us were either the captains or the physical leaders on the team?" And the number was like 15. He goes, and now when you look at today's team and you look at the roster, he goes, how many of these players are the captains of their team? And it was like one. and his theory was that leadership, that competitive drive, that willingness to carry the team over the ridge. Do you see that kind of
I think that
in today's landscape where we have very good players, but who's the leader?
I think the problem with the Copa America was that there was the team had stagnated. You look at the Copa America coaches. There's 16 teams. And I think out of those 16 coaches, at least 10 of them had been hired either that year or the year before. The United States is unique in having a coach stay for as long as Greg was in charge. And what that created was a loyalty, a mutual loyalty between the players and the coach that ended up not being a good thing. Yeah. That on a national team, you got to have everybody kind of on edge, right? You knew who was going. We all knew who was going to start, and if we all knew who was going to start, then the players all knew who was going to start. So you don't have the interest competitiveness. You need to have You need to have new players come into camp to put the other players on edge. I think that was a big factor in that Copa America. I think the team is better than it. The personnel is better than it showed in that tournament. I also think that the team was too structured tactically. That maybe Greg was too much into having the players, fit his style. Where I think a national team, you want to pick the best players and then create an approach that gets the best out of your best players. I think Pochettino is more like that, where I think he's going to be a little more flexible on game to game stuff.
Yeah.
I do think I think one of the things that definitely slowed progress down was the overbearing Northern European influence on our soccer. You look at our demographic and you look at the most successful teams in the world, they're a mix of European, African, and Latin. Mm-hmm. And especially your Latin type of playmaker type. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be Hispanic. You have players like Landon Donovan and Clint Dempsey, who grew up in
Sure.
Hispanic, heavily influenced Hispanic soccer, who had that unpredictability and some of the traits that style of game is known for. So I think we need to, really figure out how to get the best out of the talent we have. I mean, it's like I could go on and on.
Sure.
More players, young players need chances in MLS. Yeah. That's.
Well, that was going to be my real quick question. Do you think that MLS has been underutilized in finding those role/grinders/ leaders that bring a little bit of grit, maybe that the more polished, elevated players that are in Europe don't necessarily have, simply due to the environment?
Yeah, it's funny, that came up a lot about, and even Pochettino would talk about, we just need to learn how to win and be competitive and all that. Mm-hmm. I think most players that get to that level are pretty damn competitive. I think that what we really need is we need more players like a Chris Pulisic who can take players on. Yeah. I think the individual skill and the creativity and I thought with Berhalter, you sometimes looked at the team where so much of the attacking came from the outside backs. And I thought of the days where you would have, and everybody had to be all-around player, which is kind of part of the game now. I get that. But I think back in the game, back in the days where you would have a playmaker who could do whatever he wanted, and then you had a defensive midfielder that would cover for him. And sometimes I think, if you have a player that maybe doesn't track back, the two players who walked the most during the 2022 World Cup were Mbappe and Messi, the two best players.
Right.
Yeah. They had the least steps.
Yeah.
We need we need to take it. We need to have something extra. I think the competitiveness stuff that can't be that hard to find.
As a publication, as the longtime news outlet that you guys are, how much are you guys licking your chops with having our most coveted tournament coming to our backyard here in 2 short years? What does that mean for you guys, and how are you latching on to the popularity of the game that's going to bring us even more? I mean, it's going to be a boom.
And do you need a roaming podcast crew to help cover games?
And do you need my social security number, my W-2? I'm just kidding. But what does the most important tournament in our world coming to our homeland, what does that mean for you guys in the Soccer America meeting room?
Good question.
Well, it's always, personally, it's always fantastic, right? And it reminds us of the 94 World Cup. It's also, a big welcome challenge for us, because we know that whenever there's a big event, that soccer is going to get more coverage than it ever does, right? And so it challenges us to deliver something that, that is different, that is not the same as what everybody else is going to do. And, one of the things we've been thinking about since we knew the World Cup was coming here, are looking at the venues and looking at the where the games are going to be and the history of those games. And it opens up all kinds of possibilities, of ways to cover it. So, it's, and I got to say, sometimes it really hasn't sunk in.
Yeah,
I'd imagine.
It's like it started sinking in a little bit when I was in Guadalajara, because they finally had a game in Guadalajara when the U.S. was there, because they're going to host. Mexico's hosting a few of the games. And the U.S. is hosting most of them.
right.
And Mexico usually plays in Mexico City. They finally had a game in Guadalajara, but it's going to happen sooner than we realize. But it is. It's a lot different than 94, right? Like, you have so many more soccer fans than we had in 94. Not that we didn't have a lot back then,
So let's prognosticate here a little bit. World Cup 2 years away. Poch finally got the job. We know roughly who the core of our team is going to be. There's probably 5, 6, 7 names that are going to be fluid over the next, 12, 18 months going into.
I think the goalie's open. Probably.
Yeah. When you look at the team, you look at the World Cup around the corner, you look at, the expectations. What are yours? What to you would result or equate to a successful run for U.S. soccer, on our home turf? Is it quarters? Is it semis? What do you think is critical for us to say we did our job?
Yeah, I mean, the minimum is the quarterfinals, right? Because that's the best we've done. It'll be different though, right? Because there'll be one more knockout round game, but
right.
That and because it's a bigger tournament, the competition is going to be diluted in the group stage. So definitely, quarterfinal. Otherwise, I think that would be a disappointment. And then, it's so hard to say. I mean, international soccer is pretty curious, right? You have a team like Italy that wins the World Cup and gets knocked out of the next one in the first round and doesn't
Right.
qualify for. The 2018 World Cup that the U.S. didn't go to, Italy and Holland didn't go to either. And then you get to a World Cup, but I think the big challenge is not really having a lot of high quality games before that.
Right.
You go by, I was talking to Mike Sorber about this, and they didn't have like a CONCACAF Nations League and all that when Bora was preparing for the 94 World Cup. So they had friendlies against England and Brazil and Germany, and the U.S. team is not going to have, and they don't have to qualify because they're hosting. So,
right.
I think that's going to be a big challenge.
Get meaningful games, right? Is what you're saying. Just get good games to get us game ready to be able to compete at the level that it takes to win in the World Cup.
Yeah, and I think what will really be a sign of how good of a coach Pochettino is if he's got players there that he's had for the year and a half up to the World Cup, who maybe aren't looking fantastic, and there's some players who are doing fantastic for their clubs. Is he going to bring those guys in? Because I think that's going to make a difference. I think you got to pick players who are, you can always have exceptions. 2002 World Cup, Frankie Hejduk and Tony Sano weren't getting playing time in Germany. Had good World Cups. So I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
But don't keep a guy on the team because he's been with you for a long time.
Yeah.
When maybe there's a 21-year-old who's breaking out somewhere and, deserves to be on the team.
I.e. the goalie position is just, there's 11 positions, as you know. But the goalie position comes to mind, especially when you are talking about this narrative, in my opinion.
Yeah, you need you need a hot goalie. I always look at these tournaments through the lens of the NHL hockey. You can do whatever you want in the regular season, just make the playoffs, and if you have a hot goalie, anything's possible. And right now, U.S. soccer, as much as we've been historically stout between the pipes, we have good guys. But I don't think we have anybody that's like, oh my God, that's the one.
Well, case in point, Tim Howard in his famous World Cup, he put us on his back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't think any of us thought we'd be sitting around 2 years before hosting the World Cup and being worried about our goalkeepers.
Oh yeah, first time in 40 years, right?
I think part of that is a little bit about there's a bit of a myth about Americans are going to have great goalkeepers because they're used to playing with their hands and all that. That could be an advantage, obviously, but other countries that didn't, had great goalkeepers that, it wasn't because they were playing other sports and it's not. But it is really curious that after Casey Keller and Brad Friedel and Tony Mila and Tim Howard, but there's Diego Kutchin, the young kid at Barcelona, and there's Gaga Slonina, who he didn't get time. Schulte got time at the Olympics.
Right.
Okay, I wouldn't. I mean, I was on a video conference call with Matt Turner the other day, and the guy is just a wonderful guy.
Absolutely great guy.
But I don't see why you would start him right now. I just don't get that. I don't get playing a guy who doesn't play for his club. And Schulte.
You could argue bring Brad Guzan back. Look at what he's doing in Atlanta. I mean, he just shut down Messi.
Well, and I think that it's kind of transformed, definitely in front of your eyes and in front of our eyes. And I would never badmouth any of our American players. No. And that's not where I'm going with this. But you saw the transformation of the goalkeeper in our game and their foot skills and what it means to distribute and playing more as a sweeper keeper like and I wouldn't call it a sweeper keeper, but the goalie's foot skills internationally are so important. And there was a day where that wasn't the case, and for me, our goalie pool, that's the thing that they can improve on. And in our youth game and as we start to mature, I think the goalies that we currently have on our group struggle with their feet and distributing the ball. I mean, that's clear. And until we get somebody that can, Mr. Turner saves a PK yet last night. Great save.
And he caused. Remember, he caused that PK.
Yeah, you're right. He did cause the PK.
He bailed himself out.
But until we need a goalie to take the position by the throat and run with it. We don't have that.
So here's the deal, Mike. We have monopolized plenty of your early afternoon, late afternoon, happy hour time out in Oakland. I just really thank you for agreeing to come on the show. This has been a lot of fun, and I think raise your glass there. Is that a Pinot? Is that a Cab? What do you?
It's coffee.
Oh, coffee, coffee out of the wine glass, man. You're a pro.
We were up late last night. We had the Jamaica game last night. I was up late.
Well, we've kind of hit the finish line on our side. We have kids that are training. We got to go pick them up. So,
Okay.
but thank you so much for joining us. I will definitely stay in touch, and you know, we really appreciate your insight. Would love to have you back on because obviously there's constantly going to be soccer news. So if you're willing, we'd love to have you back and do this again and spread the Soccer America news and insight through our STL connections here, because everybody around here had a subscription. So
you know, there was no St. Louis players on any of the Soccer America teams of the century. I mean, I think the Yeagleys paid Soccer America because the whole forward staff were from Indiana, and then Anson, and then Anson. I think the whole team was full of North Carolina girls. So there's something going on there. I think that Mr. Clark or Mr. Warming or somebody, Dan, or maybe even, you know, somebody at SLU, there could have been a SLU kid on that all-century team.
Could have been. Well, Mike, thank you very much, man. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, I look forward to staying in touch and coming to St. Louis soon.
Hey, when you come in, we will treat you to the beloved Thin Crust Provel and some Budweisers, and actually, we'll treat you to Urban Chestnut. We'll give you craft beer. We're a craft beer town these days.
I'm fine.
All right, thanks, Mike, for joining us. Appreciate it, Soccer Dad Pod. We are on our way out of here. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Like, review, follow, share. We'll catch you next time.